All right, with no further ado, the forms that we'll see are on primarily what's called Form 1A and Form 1B. And I have the percentages there. Now, if we add up these two numbers, you see that we only get to 99. So the last 1% are an additional type of population schedule that was specifically developed for the Northwest Territories, and then also used for certain parts of the Yukon and other predominantly indigenous areas, I believe, of Ontario. They're in sort of around the Hudson Bay. And that's Form 1 NWT. Again, it's a little weird because it looks like they did decide to use these for a few locations outside of the Northwest Territories, but these are rather rare, again, representing only 1% of all of the forms. The geography in 1931 is pretty much as we know it today, obviously with the exception that the newmost territory, or the newest territory of Nunavut, is not present. That was established in the last, 20, 30 years. Special note about Newfoundland. So Newfoundland didn't join the Canadian Confederation until 1949. And so Newfoundland and Labrador are not included in the 1931 census. There are other censuses that were conducted in Newfoundland and Labrador. I thought about trying to include a little more comprehensive view of all the Canadian censuses and what was conducted when. I decided that if I did that, I would fail at both my topic here of addressing deeply the 1931 and trying to give an overview of other censuses. Canada does have a rich and incredible history with census collection, especially prior to 1851 or so. There's lots of smaller specific censuses, and then some complexity as well with some of the provinces out in the West as they started to be developed, and other cases here like Newfoundland. So probably watch for a webinar that I may put together next year here with Legacy, where we might do a more comprehensive view of Canadian censuses. All right, so we're going to dive into this example. We have this Ole Jorgensen, born in 1873 in Norway. And at the bottom, I'm showing you what we call our individual, sort of our record view looks like. And then let's go ahead and look at the record. So see, we have the name of the individual, his gender, his birth year. So in the 1931 census, we only have age. So age, he's listed as 58. So when we write circa here, this means that we've computed an approximate birth year, right? We're just taking 58 and subtracting it from 1931. So he could be born in 1872 as well, depending on when his birthday might have happened. We also have in the index for 1931 the religion. This is a field we often don't key, but we decided to include it here. Marital status, the residence, this township of Springfield. This, when I looked it up, looks like it's a sort of suburban township area just to the east of Manitoba. Of Winnipeg, very near Winnipeg. I'm almost certain of easy commuting distance. Another thing I like about this record, it shows us that he naturalized or became a naturalized Canadian citizen in the year 1900. He's declaring his nationality as Canadian. We get information about his father and mother's birthplace, his wife. Unfortunately, we're going to be getting wives' married names here, not their maiden name, and then the names of a number of children. And then down here in this section, we have a number of fields that are sort of metadata, page number, line number, the dwelling number, etc. And then we get to the image itself. I can look at it here, I can zoom around, but I also often like to click into the image and get this view where I can get the household on the left and the record on the right. I can also collapse that to see just the names, or I can just collapse the whole thing, and I can bring it back if I want with this control. So this individual was here at the bottom, line 41, and his name is Ole Jorgensen. So here's the image that I just showed you of Ole Jorgensen and his family of a spouse and 8 or 9 children. I haven't counted how many children. And what we're going to do is we're going to dissect this. And so up here at the top, we get this header, and this is Form 1B. Form 1B was generally used for more rural areas of the country, and 1A is more of the urban or city areas. Although that doesn't always perfectly hold true, you'll certainly run into some, say, fairly densely populated towns where maybe they're using Form 1B or 1A and vice versa. And I'll show you the differences between the two in just a moment. So here at the top, we get information about the province, the electoral district, and the municipality. They're sort of in the upper center right. The information about the enumerator. We didn't include the name of the enumerator, and rarely do in a census like this, and the page number. Then we get a header that gives us information about the fields in both French and English. Then we get the body of the schedule, which is 50 individuals for both Forms 1A and B. And at the bottom, and I think there's some good things to recognize down here, and I'll include this as we go forward in just the next few minutes, are some abbreviations that the census enumerators were asked to use. They always don't follow exactly the instructions, but generally they're doing or did okay. And I'll show you some of those. All right, so we're going to be looking at this part. If you're okay, I'm just going to be cutting out the English portion of the field descriptions. And then we'll look at this family. I will also include, we're actually going to do this in two segments. We're first going to look at the left side of the page and the family below. I'll include the line numbers and the footer portion where we get these abbreviation tables along with it. And then we'll do the same thing for the left side. So just so you get aware, just so that you are aware, the next two slides will be sort of a photoshopping, if you will, of these different components, both the left side and a right side. All right, so the left side of Form 1B, if we zoom in a little bit, I've put in here the column numbers, and then here are rows 41 through 50. And so here we see this individual. So we get a dwelling or house number, a family, household, or institution. I'll talk a little bit more about those a little bit later when I'm talking about the work we did to reconstitute these family households. We get the name of the individual for every person that's enumerated. It depends. Sometimes the enumerator will use a ditto indicator, ditto or copy down indicator, as he or she did here, indicating that all the people 41 through 49 have the surname Jorgensen. Place of abode. So here on Form 1A, they're asking about section numbers, township numbers, range numbers, and meridians. This is maybe a good point just to quickly mention that censuses are frustrating when we look at low-level jurisdictions. Generally, they do a really nice job, like in Canada or the US, of being well structured at, say, the provincial or state level. And then they do fairly well going to a level below that, say, to a county or some other lower jurisdictions. But when you get into cities and villages, that wasn't really the intent of the way the government was trying to collect the information. And so the towns and villages that are often listed in places can be very unstandardized, very inconsistent. And so here in the 1931 Canada Census, we chose to focus our presentation of residence places off of the very top part of the header in the municipality, the district, and the province. I just wanted to point that out, especially when you see the difference here in this section for question 4. When I show the difference for Form 1A, you'll see that there'll be some additional information that you might find useful there. And then also at the bottom, here's where we get information about some of these abbreviations that they use. For example, in field 5, was the home owned or rented? At the bottom, we see that if they indicated owned, then they were to write the letter O. Other information you can see here, one interesting thing about this census, just like they did in the United States in 1930, is they had this interesting question, question 10, does this family have a radio? It kind of makes sense. It would almost be like in a modern census here in US or Canada, they might ask, does the household have an internet connection or an internet service provider? Be a very similar sort of way of understanding how they might be able to get information. Additional fields here is that we normally see such as relationship to head, the gender, their marital status, their age at the last birthday. And then we get the place of birth in 15 for the person themselves, as well as for his or her parents, both the father and the mother. All right, then if we look at the right side of the same form, we get questions 18 through 40. And if I put in, again, the same records corresponding to the same gentleman from Norway, but his family was born, his children were all born in Ontario, and I think he married a woman from Ontario. But it shows us his year of immigration. All right, so we get their nationality. Everyone here is listed as Canada, and then their racial origin. So Norwegian, Belgian, and then the children here all being born in Canada, but they're claiming racial origin of Norwegian, which I find interesting. Information about what languages they can speak, both French and or English. Information about the religion, Church of England, and as I indicated, this is a field that we did decide to transcribe and include in our index. So this might be helpful if you're looking for specific families and you have maybe a really common surname, and perhaps knowing their religion will help you segment the results better. 26 and 27 were information about reading and writing and how many months at school they were, and then occupation, industry. The rest of the fields here, 28 through 40, these are not in the index that we created. And so this is an example where you definitely want to come and look at the associated image with records you're examining to see what additional clues here you can find, such as their occupation, which industry they're in, number of weeks that they were working. I think question 34 will talk about the impact of the Great Depression, particularly on the census, in just a moment. And so the government, in some of these questions, 32 through 40, we're looking for information about people's employment status. So here's a comparison of the differences between Form 1A and 1B, and the differences are all in question 4. In Form 1B at the top, you see that it's broken out into 4, 4A, 4B, and 4C, and in the bottom it's just question 4, which is more of a kind of a free form field where they could write in all sorts of things. In a large city, we might see the name of a street, the name of an apartment. The enumerators necessarily didn't follow instructions too well on what they wrote in that, which is unfortunate. So yeah, so the differences are here in field 4 and 4A, B, and C. And then I mentioned 1% of the schedules are what's called Form 1 NWT for Northwest Territories. Here's an example of this place, Aklavik. I had to look this place up. It's a small village. I think today there's about 600 people that live here, and it's near the delta of the Mackenzie River, way up there in the northern reaches of the Northwest Territories. This form seemed to have specific focus on collecting information about First Nations, Indigenous peoples specifically, but that doesn't mean that it's exclusively Indigenous peoples. For example, here at the top we have 2 households where the racial or tribal origin is indicated as Indian. And then we get 3 households here at the bottom, or at least 2.5 households, for that last household may continue on to the next page, that are indicated as Eskimo. And then sandwiched in between them, we get 3 gentlemen from Denmark who are there working as a trapper, as we see over in field 16. In the materials that are presented that we receive from Library and Archives Canada, they have these wonderful title boards. And I'll show you how you find these on the website as well when you're looking at the index. But we get the name of the province, the district number, the district name, the sub-district number, and very often some sort of sub-district name and a description. I don't think this is, in this case, this is the name of the sub-district, St. Bruno Parish. Some of these will have a more extended description as well. Let me just start a new search here. We'll come back to the 1931 census. And again, I can type Canada, 1931 Canada, that's going to give me the same hit. And so, for example, we can search for another individual here, Alexander Lacoste, and His residence is St. Bruno, and he's in this district called Chamblay-Verchères, I believe. Yeah, so here we have an individual, Andre Lacoste, and if I click on his record again, down here in the image view, you see that we have this control here. And so at the very first page for every sub-district, every record you come to, and if you look at that control and go to the first image, you should land on the title, this title board for this sub-district. I can use this back arrow to go back to the image that I came on. And so this does now open up some additional searching capabilities where I can say, okay, I want to search for anyone by this name in this specific sub-district. And so let me change a setting here. I'm going to say place must match and hit apply. So now in this sub-district, again, this is a very tight geographic area again, we see that there's 13 individuals enumerated with that surname. So this is a very effective way to narrow your results down. As you're looking for surnames, perhaps think about how to use those sub-districts. A very powerful kind of way to search. You can also just, I think, remove the last name entirely and hit search, and the sub-district has almost 1,100 individuals, and you could look at every person in the index for that one. Moving forward, let's talk about the release of the 1931 census and how we got to where we are today. So the original paper census returns were microfilmed in the 1950s by the Dominion Bureau of Statistics. And as is very common, not only in Canada, but around the world, after the microfilm was created, the original paper returns were destroyed. So I think by about 1970 or 71, Statistics Canada had been organized, and this Dominion Bureau of Statistics had been folded into Statistics Canada. But thankfully, in the year about 2005 to 2006, they made a new master microfilm copy. Acetate microfilms that these originally were stored on have this interesting problem where acetate or acetic acid is the same acid that gives vinegar its sort of acidic smell and flavor. And so acetate microfilms, under certain conditions, can start to essentially produce acetic acid. And I've been at some institutions where you open up a can of microfilm and it smells like a jar of pickles. And so thankfully, the Canadian archivists realized that this was a risk, and maybe they had indication this was starting to happen, and so they did make a new master microfilm copy. That copy was held by Statistics Canada until January of this year, when the microfilm was transferred to Library and Archives Canada. There were 187 rolls of microfilm, and Library and Archives Canada digitized the microfilm between when they received it there in January and June 1st. So that's just about 104 days ago, something like that, is when the images were published or were available for partners such as ourselves to download. There are just over 230,000 digital images. So on June 1st, we downloaded the images from Library and Archives Canada. The next 2 to 3 days, we spent building what we call the King specification and preparing the images for King. The images actually came to us as a number of very large compressed zip files. Some of these zip files took hours to decompress just on their own. And then on June 5th, we started the indexing. June 6th, the next day, some of the first what we call index returns. These are batches of index records that are coming out of our indexing operations group. And then on August 20th, the index was completed. So about 80 days to create the index, averaging 130 records per day. And then we spent about the next 20 days completing data processing, data normalization, and loading the content into the publication systems. And then September 10th, earlier this week, the index was released on MyHeritage. So again, just one of the hallmarks of my career has been being able to work on projects like this. When I retire, it'll be days like September 10th, releasing of this important census that I'll always remember fondly. I want to talk a little bit about data normalization and what goes into some of this sausage making that I referred to. What did we do for the last 20 days as we were preparing? So one thing that I always like to use as an example is consider the relation to head, or what's the relationship to the head of the family. So you and I could probably sit down and think, yeah, maybe we'd get a couple hundred unique values here, you know, sister, grandmother, niece, cousin, cousin-in-law, great-grandfather, grandnephew, whatever. But we get an index back like this, and we'll have tens of thousands of unique values. In this case, we had over 16,000 unique values of relationship to head. And so normalization is this work we do, and all organizations in our field do this. It's the work we do to interpret the many variant or wrong forms and spellings to make a corrected version of that field or of that data. For example, wife, here are a few of the dozens of different ways that wife appeared in the index. And because this is Canada, we also get the same thing in French for the French word for wife. And so normalization is looking at all these 16,000 different unique values. And when we were done, we were just over 300 standardized or normalized relationship to head fields or values. Household reconstruction is also particularly challenging. Very often, a census will present a construct like this in the 1931 census, where they're giving us a household kind of start and stop indicator with a number. And this is very clean, and this looks really promising. And if we look at this household, you know, a very sort of standard atomic household with a head, a wife, 2 daughters and 2 sons. But then going down further, you see we have a head, a son, a daughter-in-law. So that daughter-in-law is probably the wife of the son. And then we get 2 granddaughters who are probably the children of the son and the daughter-in-law. So this is an example of a multi-generational household that I mentioned a little while ago. Another interesting example here, where we have a head, 53-year-old man whose mother is living with him, and so mother is there at the bottom. And so we also get inconsistencies based on who the head is, right? So some of the children here are granddaughter of the mother, but they're also the daughter or son of the head. And so also different ways that we get tripped up. But this census was particularly challenging in that they seemed to not like the way that the enumerators were recording these household numbers, and they like to scratch them out and write corrections and then scratch out the corrections and write new versions. Basically what I'm trying to say is we pretty much had to abandon our hope that we could use those with any degree of reliability. And instead we had to use other techniques to dissect these family groups based on surnames, relationship to head, and other fields that we had present. Thank you for your time. Again, my name is Mike Mansfield. Here's my email address at MyHeritage. If you have a question, maybe you don't have time or want to ask it publicly, I'm always happy to receive emails separately. And it was lovely diving into the 1931 Canada Census with you.